We're back here on Public Affairs on Peach. Cobb County District Attorney Vic Reynolds joins me now at the table to talk about the law enforcement side of domestic violence. Good morning, Vic. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about it. When you get a case in your office of domestic violence, how do you view it, and how do you decide to prosecute or not?
Well, in order for a case to come to us, it has to be a pretty serious matter. We prosecute only felonies in the DA's office, and so when those cases come to us, they're assigned out to individual prosecutors. We make some decision then as to the quality of the evidence, what type of case it is. We reach out to the victim. We see if that victim's cooperative, and then we make some decision about whether or not to go forward to a grand jury and ultimately to prosecution. If it's a DV case, we obviously take those cases very serious. They're assigned to the prosecutors, and they're pursued through the system.
Now, lots of times in law enforcement, they can profile certain types of criminals in advance and kind of predict their behavior. Is that possible for domestic violence? Is that something that's done?
You know, it isn't on the front end. You may have an individual that has committed several acts of domestic violence, and you'll be able to look at that individual's history and dictate or be able to forecast whether or not he or she will commit another crime. But on the front end, you can't do that. Domestic violence runs across the gamut of society. Your economic status, your demographic, sometimes even the gender, but certainly your race, none of that has anything to do with DV cases. We see them from virtually every walk of life.
Is it true that people who abuse animals are more likely to abuse women when they get older?
Yeah, we've seen multiple research articles, volumes of research done that indicate to us if a person is hurting, abusing an animal, there's a strong likelihood that the next step will be an individual, and we frequently see that in DV cases. I'll give you a great example. Within the last 3 or 4 weeks, we finished a trial in Cobb County where we prosecuted an individual for animal abuse. He physically kicked a dog and almost killed the dog, and as we got into the evidence, our animal abuse prosecutor told me that this was done to pay back his significant other. She had left him. He could not control her anymore. Kept the dog, hurt the dog with the intent and purpose of striking back at her. So yes, it's all related.
What can be done to stop that? If that's something that is seen early on, probably doesn't rise to the level of prosecution most times, but if you're a family member that has someone in your family that's younger and abusing animals, how do you stop that and stop it from getting out of control, not just domestic violence, but violence in general?
I think there's two things you have to do. One, the family has to be aware if they see a young person hurting an animal, abusing an animal, that is a tremendous red flag that's being raised to say we need to do something. We need to intervene in this child's life to get him or her some help. The second thing that needs to be done, and one of the commitments we've made in Cobb County, is that if you're an adult age and you abuse an animal, you will be prosecuted. We've sent people to prison, multiple people, in fact, in the past calendar year, for abusing animals, and we take that very serious. I have a prosecutor that's dedicated to that. That's what she does. And so we've made that commitment in Cobb that if you do that to an animal, the next step is going to be you're doing it to either a child, your significant other, your spouse.
It's a gateway crime, in other words.
Absolutely. And so you have to take it serious and prosecute it.
I'm curious to get your thoughts. When someone's in an abusive relationship, the first thing that always comes to mind is a restraining order. How does that work? How do you get one? Do they work?
Well, you know, I tell people back when I was a judge and issued what we call protective orders, TPOs, temporary protective orders, I tell them this is a piece of paper. It won't stop a bullet. It won't stop a knife. It won't stop an assault. But it's a tool that you can have when you call 911 if need be. The police can act on that. So we encourage people to get protective orders if they need it. It's a civil process, Bobby. It's a little bit different from a criminal case where the victim would come into a superior court and say, I need a protective order. Thankfully in Cobb, when you do that in our county, there's an advocate in the court system who takes that person, walks them through the system, gets them inside of a judge's chamber so the judge can decide whether or not to issue the order. That initial order is only good for 10 days. So in that 10-day time frame, there's going to be a hearing in front of a judge where the other person, the person against whom the order's been sought, will be in court. And the request there will be whether or not to extend it for 12 months. So in the end, it's a tool, it's a valuable tool. But again, as I've told victims over the years, in reality, it's a piece of paper.
How long can it take from first call to getting in the courtroom and getting that order taken care of?
they're what we call ex parte orders, which are very unusual in the court system. That means that if somebody is seeking a protective order against another individual, that individual initially doesn't even have to be told. He doesn't even have to be in the court system, and that's a very unusual process. So if you go to the courthouse and apply for a protective order, that most court systems will literally respond that day. You can get the order the day you ask for it.
Important information. Vic, thanks so much for coming in and sharing the law enforcement side
Thank
of
you.
this. When we return, hear from a man trying to help other men break the cycle of abuse.